They removed my graduation photo from the wall, like I never existed. No explanation, no apology, just a pale square where I used to be. Hi, I'm Delaney Shaw. For 28 years, I tried to be the daughter they could be proud of, until I realized being visible in your own family sometimes requires becoming unerasable. What would you do if the people who raised you rewrote you out of their legacy? Have you ever been the one who kept everything together, but got left out when it mattered most? Tell me in the comments, because this isn't just my story. It might be yours too. Let me take you back to the moment it all began, the moment I realized silence wasn't peace. It was controlled. They're not coming, are they? I asked Jasmine that question, half joking, half hoping, as my fingers curled tighter around the edges of the graduation program. I was standing near the info booth in my cap and gown, scanning the courtyard like I'd lost something vital. No, not something. Someone. Plural. That morning, as I brushed powder under my eyes, I called Jasmine. Maybe they got the time wrong, I said, trying to laugh. Or the building. Jasmine went quiet, the kind of quiet you don't interrupt. Delaney, she finally said. Harper just posted, they're in Kish, Iran. Beachfront. Are you sure? Her caption is, family first. With a heart and palm trees. I didn't say anything else. Just clicked the end. I put the phone down and tried to reapply my lipstick. My hand wasn't steady anymore. The woman at the booth wore a bright blazer and a practiced smile. Name? Kensington, I said, then corrected myself. Or Shaw, Randall, or Vivienne. Maybe Harper. She typed quickly. I watched her eyes flick from screen to face and the smile softened, like she already knew. I'm sorry. No one by those names checked in under a graduate's guest list. I nodded. Smiled. Not the kind of smile that invited conversation, the kind that hid one more bruise. I backed away before my voice cracked, pretending to check my phone. Instead, I saw it. The picture. A fresh Instagram post from Harper. White sands, blue water. Vivienne, cocktail in hand. Walter, lying back in a designer cabana like a retired king. Caption. Recharge mode with my ride or dies, family first. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry either. I simply stared until the screen blurred. 1 year ago, Walter had said, when you walk across that stage, we'll be front row. No distractions. That sentence carried me through winter, through sleepless nights and cheap coffee-fueled critiques. I'd even chosen my gown color to match his favorite tie, the slate blue one with subtle diagonal lines. Now, the cap sat heavy on my head, and the crowd roared around me. The courtyard around me exploded with joy. People hugging, shouting names, tossing caps like confetti. I was just outside that bubble, not quite invited but too proud to leave. Dean Moore spotted me. Somehow he always did, like grief had its own scent, and he was fluent in it. Delaney Shaw? He asked gently. I nodded, trying to square my shoulders. I saw your final piece, the chair installation. He paused. That kind of stillness stays with you. I couldn't summon words, so I whispered, thank you. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a silver-rimmed card. The name on it gleamed, Cross and Company. They're hiring serious talent. I think you should talk to them. I took the card like it weighed more than my diploma. Maybe it did. When he left, I stood still, stiffer than any sculpture I'd ever built. Then I turned and walked. No photos, no champagne, no parents with flowers. Just the sound of my heels echoing against too clean concrete. The night before, I had stayed up late in the rental kitchen, baking. The scones had to be right. Blueberry, just like Vivian liked. I measured everything precisely. Re-rolled the dough when the swirl pattern wasn't right. Wrapped each one in wax paper, like gifts. I even whispered while folding them, "She likes the edges crispy." As if anyone would notice. As if someone would care. As I approached the house, my childhood house, Clarice's peonies lined the walkway like guards of a perfect life. The inside was quiet, surgical. Every painting is exactly level. Every mirror is spotless. And on the photo wall, something was wrong. I stepped closer. There had once been a graduation photo of me, not just a casual one, framed, formal, me standing between Walter and Vivienne. His arm had hovered awkwardly behind me, but present. It was gone. In its place, nothing. Not even a new frame. Just an outline of pale paint where it had been, a clean erasure. Like I'd been proofread out of the family history. I didn't scream. Didn't demand why. I just walked up to the room I used to sleep in, sat down on the edge of the bed, and stared at the scarf Vivienne gave me years ago. It was still folded neatly in my tote. Unused. Unclaimed. They always said I was dramatic. But silence isn't drama. It's a strategy. Later that evening, I opened the fridge. The blueberry scones I'd baked were still there. Untouched. I had made them hoping, stupidly, that someone would reach for one at brunch. Say thank you. Instead, they sat cold and sweet and mine. My phone buzzed. Jasmine again. A text. Saw your face on Midvale's IG Live. You looked strong. You okay? I didn't reply, but I let myself exhale. One breath. One beat of stillness. They hadn't just missed my graduation. They had chosen not to come. They hadn't forgotten. They had deleted. And for the first time, I let that sentence finish itself in my head without apologizing for it. I brought scones, I said, knowing no one would take one. It was the first time I had walked into that house without knocking, and yet, somehow, it still managed to feel like I wasn't allowed. The entryway smelled the same. Citrus and polish. Money and disapproval. The walls gleamed, trimmed with surgical white and navy gloss, like they were auditioning for a catalog called Perfection. Every chair was tucked, every cushion fluffed. But there was no space for me. Vivienne looked up from the sunroom when I stepped in, just a glance. She didn't rise. Walter sat at the dining table reading something on his tablet, fingers swiping like he was reorganizing the fate of nations. Harper's voice floated from the kitchen, all brightness and volume, made for echo. "Delaney," she called, without turning, "you made it." How was the traffic? There was no mention of graduation, no apology, no remorse, just brunch. I walked to the dining table and placed the box of pastries gently at the end, as if setting down a peace offering no one asked for. "I brought blueberry scones," I said quietly. No one responded. Harper was laughing at her own joke. Vivienne lifted her teacup and sipped, as if I'd released something foul into the air by speaking. I sat down slowly, folding my hands into my lap. "I had an exhibit last week," I tried, still holding on to the idea that art meant something here. Downtown gallery, over 200 people came. Vivienne looked at me then, eyebrows arched, tone surgical. "You've always been, how do I say it, performative. Even as a child, you didn't need a stage, just attention." It landed like glass in my throat. I smiled through it. "I thought you might want to know," I replied, voice even. Walter finally looked up. His eyes were calm, professional, like he was in a boardroom, not a kitchen. "If we're being honest," he said, "we shouldn't have had a third child. We weren't ready." There it was. A statement so clean, so matter-of-fact, you could frame it. Harper didn't even flinch. Vivienne took another sip. I stared at them for a beat longer than necessary, then stood. The chair scraped back against the floor like a protest. "I need some air." I didn't head straight for the door. My feet turned down the hallway on their own, past the guest bath, toward the photo wall. Muscle memory guided me there, like I was still 6, hoping to see myself among people who claimed me. And then I stopped. The wall was full, curated, glowing with faux joy. Harper's wedding, Harper's baby shower, Walter receiving an award, Vivienne at a gala. Even Ethan, my half-brother who hadn't visited in 5 years, had his science fair picture. But not me. Not even the old high school one where Walter had his arm on my shoulder, awkward but present. Gone. In its place, a faint square of untouched paint, dust-lined, ghostly. I reached out, fingertips hovering, the shape of absence pressed into drywall. And then, out of nowhere, a memory surfaced. I was 15, clearing boxes from the attic after Vivian said the space needed to be decluttered. I'd found an old shoebox full of photos. One of them, me at 7, sitting on Walter's lap. Both of us mid-laugh, some ice cream melting onto my dress. That night, I brought it down, placed it quietly on the coffee table in the living room. By morning, it was gone. I never saw it again. I turned away from the wall, walking back toward the kitchen, but paused just before reaching it. Something caught my eye, an empty chair tucked against the wall. Not just any chair. My old spot at the table. It had no place setting, no napkin, no chair pad. Just a stiff white cloth thrown over the seat like it had been banished. The gesture was so small it hurt more than any word could. I left the room, shoes barely whispering across the floor. At the threshold, I paused again. My tote bag felt heavier. The scarf Vivian gave me years ago still lay folded inside, untouched. And something else. The manila folder I'd stuffed at the last second, just in case. Cabin contribution docs. I didn't plan to bring it, but it was there. At home, I dropped the bag on my kitchen floor and pulled the folder out like a buried secret finally unearthed. I placed it on the table, untouched for years, and stared at the label I had written in hopeful cursive, Lakeview Agreement. When I flipped it open, the documents were still pristine. Signed, notarized. 3 names at the bottom. Mine, Walter's, Vivienne's. $43,000, transferred from my account at age 24, when I had sold my first major piece and thought saving the family cabin was the most loyal thing I could do. I remembered the driveway, the sun that day, the white folding chairs I bought with my own money. Vivienne had hugged me, whispered, "You'll always have a home here." And I had believed her. I didn't ask for ownership. Didn't demand anything in writing beyond what I thought love covered. I thought memory had legal weight. I thought loyalty counted for something. I thought I counted. Now, the folder sat in front of me like evidence at a crime scene, and I whispered into the kitchen, barely audible, "They didn't just forget. They revised." Have you ever realized that the people you loved the most didn't forget you? They rewrote you? That kind of pain hits different. If you've ever felt like your existence was edited out, leave a comment number 7 below. Let's see what happened next. They changed the trust while I was unconscious. I said it aloud, and the walls didn't even flinch. There's something obscene about discovering you were erased during a time your body couldn't even sit up on its own. I stood in the center of my kitchen, a folder open like a confession, the old county seal pressed into the corner of the page like a bruise that never healed. $43,000, 3 signatures, 1 ghost. I remembered the way Vivian had hugged me in the gravel driveway the day I handed over the check. "You'll always have a home here," she whispered, mascara perfect and warm. I believed her. I had just sold my first big piece, a commission from a law firm in Chicago that wanted something emotional but neutral for their lobby. I took that money, nearly everything, and gave it to my parents because they said the cabin was going into foreclosure. I didn't ask for anything in return, not a name on a deed, Not even acknowledgement. Just belonging. That was almost a decade ago. Now, the very cabin I helped save was a weekend retreat for Harper and her curated life. I'd seen photos. Her holding a wine glass on the dock I sanded myself. I called Gordon Halley. The phone rang twice before he picked up, his voice rough like gravel. Gordon speaking. It's Delaney Shaw, I said. I'm not sure if you remember me. There was a pause, then. Of course I do. Your uncle adored you. I pressed my thumb into the folder edge, bracing. Do you still have a copy of the 2014 Lakeview contribution letter I signed? More silence. I heard the rustle of files, a drawer sliding. Yes. March 4th, 2014. Notarized. Signed by you and both parents. I swallowed. But I was removed from the trust. I'm sorry to tell you this, he said gently. The trust was amended in 2021. I notarized that as well. It was signed while you were hospitalized after the accident. I didn't speak. I was told you gave prior consent, he added, voice cautious. I didn't, I said, flat. I didn't think so, Gordon said. It felt off. We hung up, and I sat down on the floor. The cold linoleum burned through my jeans. I stayed like that for several minutes, folder in my lap, like I was trying to absorb the paper through my skin. Then I stood, showered, dressed in slate blue slacks and a structured blouse, and drove. I didn't ask permission. This wasn't a visit. It was an audit. When I rang the bell, Vivian opened the door wearing a cream sweater and a perfectly polite smile. Delaney, she said, like I was returning a borrowed baking pan. Behind her, Harper leaned on the staircase banister, mug in hand. Look who's here, she chirped. I'm not here for tea, I said. We need to talk. Formally. Walter emerged from the kitchen, holding his phone. Coffee? No. I stepped inside, placed the silver folder on the table like evidence in court. Vivienne sat. Harper hovered behind her. Walter pulled out a chair and leaned back, like this was a quarterly review. This, I said, opening the folder, is the notarized letter from 2014, $43,000, wired from my account. The same week you said the cabin was in danger. No one moved. Vivienne blinked slowly. Walter exhaled through his nose. Harper scoffed. We've been through this. You overreact. That money wasn't binding. It was a gesture. You were unstable after the accident. You weren't exactly reliable. I turned to her. You mean when I was unconscious? That's when you changed the trust? Vivian's lips thinned. It was necessary. For the family. For who, exactly? For continuity. Harper chimed in. We couldn't let things fall apart just because you disconnected. I wasn't disconnected, I said, calm as a flat line. I was in recovery. Walter finally opened his mouth. Maybe we... Vivian's glance cut him off. I pulled out the second page. This is the 2021 Trust Amendment, I continued, executed without my knowledge. You made Harper the sole inheritor. You removed me completely. I'm the one who keeps it running, Harper said. You mean manipulated and monopolized, I replied. Walter stood. For a second I thought he might say something real, but he didn't. Vivienne's veneer cracked just enough for a flicker of something ugly to shine through. What do you want, Delaney? She asked. I looked at all of them, steady. Acknowledgement, correction, mediation. Harper laughed. We're not afraid of court. You should be, I said, because I'm done being the quiet daughter. Then I laid out the final document, my ace. Gordon Halley's affidavit dated last week, confirming the legitimacy and timeline of my contribution and my removal without consent. This isn't revenge, I said, gathering the folder. It's re-entry. No one said a word. I didn't wait for them to find one. Invisible labor doesn't just mean chores. It means erasing yourself so others can shine. My voice didn't shake. It should have. But it didn't. Harmony Commons wasn't a fancy venue. Fluorescent lighting, water-stained carpet, a half-peeled banner that said shared stories. But there was honesty in the air. The kind that crackles right before someone says what no one else dares to. 1 week earlier, Allison, the woman organizing the panel, had sent me an email. "We know you've lived this. We'd be honored if you'd share." At first, I almost deleted it. Then I remembered what Harper said in front of our parents. "You were unstable. If I didn't say something now, someone else would rewrite my story. Again." I wore black jeans, a plain blazer, and my oldest boots. No makeup, no jewelry. Not because I didn't want to look good, because I didn't need to perform. I was there to speak. As I waited backstage, I thought about the photo wall, the missing frame, the ghost of dust where my face used to be. I remembered baking blueberry scones the night before graduation, thinking someone might care. I remembered Clarice's voice, calling me performative, and Walter stating I was a mistake they shouldn't have had. I also remembered the cabin, the one I paid for, the one Harper now posted wine glass selfies from. My name didn't vanish from that trust. They cut it out, clean as bone. "All right," Allison whispered, touching my shoulder. "You're up." The mic had a little feedback when I adjusted it. There were maybe 40 people in the room. Most looked tired. Some looked curious. A few looked like they didn't want to be seen at all. "Hi," I said. "I'm Delaney Shaw. I'm an artist, a daughter, a former doormat, and someone who tried really hard not to take up space." A few heads tilted. One woman murmured, softly. I used to think that if I was good, quiet, helpful, that would be enough. That someone would look at me and say, "She belongs." I paused. But invisible labor isn't just chores. It's being the emotional wallpaper of your family. It's funding things with your name missing. It's planning birthdays you're not in the photos of. It's being told you're too sensitive when you ask to be remembered. A woman in the back took off her glasses. A man shifted uncomfortably in the second row. "In my family," I continued, "I funded the cabin. I was left out of trust documents while I was unconscious. My graduation was replaced by their vacation, and when I brought it up, I was told I misremembered." I took a deep breath. And then I realized something. You don't need to be screamed at to be erased. Sometimes it just happens in lowercase choices, unspoken edits, empty chairs, a beat. Someone near the window whispered, "God." Then I heard it. "Hi," a sweet voice called out behind me. I didn't turn, but I knew that tone. Harper. She walked up to the side mic in a structured blazer, lip gloss pristine, voice warm like melted wax. "I just wanted to offer some context," she said, smiling at the audience. "Delaney's been through a lot. After her accident, memory can get fuzzy. We were all trying to do our best under stress." A few people looked at each other. Some folded arms, some leaned in. "She's incredibly talented," Harper added, "but trauma distorts narrative, and we, our family, only ever wanted to support her." She clasped her hands. "Press ready." I stepped closer to the mic. "She's right," I said. "I did have a breakdown." Harper softened, like she'd been vindicated. "And do you know why?" Silence. "Because I spent 28 years being edited out of my own life." I reached into my folder, lifted one page. "This is from my journal. My father read it before he died, and for the first time in 28 years, he cried." I didn't read it aloud. I let the weight of it hang. "Some of us," I said, "spend our lives shrinking, hoping that if we get small enough, we'll finally be allowed at the table." I looked toward Harper. "But some tables were never set for us to begin with." A breath held. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then the room filled with applause. Gentle, deliberate. Not the kind you give to be polite. The kind you give because someone finally said what you couldn't. Later, I stepped outside into the fading sunlight. My breath felt taller, like it wasn't hiding anymore. My phone buzzed. From Arthur Lau. Subject: something your father wanted you to have. I stood on the curb and let the wind touch my hands. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. To Delaney, because I finally saw who really kept this family upright. I read it once, then again, then again. The handwriting was unmistakable. Angled, rushed, always pushing too close to the paper's edge, like my father ran out of patience before he ran out of ink. But this time, there was something gentler in the strokes. A hesitation, a cost. Arthur Lau sat across from me in his warm-lit office, framed in dark wood and stillness. A small teapot steamed between us, casting a thin spiral of warmth into the quiet. He signed this addendum 11 months before he passed, Arthur said gently. He asked that I deliver it only if you still needed clarity. I didn't speak. I just opened the envelope. Inside was a notarized document, an official amendment to the trust. My name was reinstated. Equal share. No qualifiers. But it was the note, the handwritten one, that unraveled something in my chest. You were never the problem. You were the spine, the bridge. I just never had the courage to walk across it. There was another line, blurred at the bottom by what I wasn't sure. Ink or grief. I should have said it in person. I folded the page, pressed it to my chest, and let the weight of recognition land. It brought me back to something I'd forgotten. When I was 8, I wrote a note on scrap paper that said, "Someday, someone will say thank you." I folded it, sealed it in a wooden box, and buried it under the tree beside the cabin. I hadn't thought about that note in years, until now. The road to the Shaw house felt different that day. Smaller somehow. Each turn lined with the memory of absence. I didn't text, didn't warn. I just drove, parked, and stepped out with the envelope in hand. This wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't revenge. It was closing. I didn't knock. Clarice opened the door with her usual control, hair pinned high, posture sharp. But there was a flicker, a flash of unreadiness. I held out the envelope. "This isn't for approval," I said. "This is closure." Walter sat on the porch bench, hands loose in his lap. Clarice handed him the letter, then stepped back as if bracing herself. I didn't enter. I didn't offer comfort. I just watched as he opened it. He skimmed the paragraphs, slowing only at the handwritten one. When he reached the bottom, his hands trembled. His shoulders sank. The letter remained in his lap like a confession he hadn't meant to make. Have you ever stood in front of the people who hurt you and realized you didn't need their apology to win? That moment when the truth speaks louder than revenge. If you've ever reclaimed your power without needing anyone's permission, drop a comment number 9 below. Let's see how this ends. Clarice stood behind him, arms folded, but I saw her thumb begin to shake. Harper was in the hallway leaning against the doorframe like a ghost, unsure whether to speak. No one did. I turned away and walked down the steps. I didn't check behind me. I didn't wait for the door to shut. Just as I started the engine, my phone lit up. Text from Arthur. Your name has been restored to the primary trust records, effective immediately. I didn't go home. I went to the lake. The cabin smelled like rain and cedar. I walked into the living room and opened the bottom drawer of the old desk. Inside, wrapped in a crumpled cloth, was a photo. Me at 8 years old, smiling crookedly, a white streak of paint across my cheek. I'd been helping repaint the porch. No one had framed that picture, but I kept it. Next to the fireplace, I found the wooden box I'd dug up the summer before but hadn't dared open. I opened it now. The paper was yellowed, but still legible. Someday, someone will say thank you. I smiled. Not bitter, not broken, just free. I placed the photo and the paper together on the mantel. Then I reached into the side drawer and pulled out the letter I'd written years ago, the one I'd never sent. I forgive you. I unfolded it. Read it one last time. Then I struck a match and watched it burn. The flame curled the page quickly, greedily. But the ash rose softly, as if the weight had finally lifted. That night, sitting beside the hearth, I held the red ribbon in my hand, and for the first time I didn't need to be heard, because I had already been seen. The wind off Lakeview was softer that morning. I stood on the rebuilt porch of the cabin, cinnamon tea in one hand, my other tracing the edges of the wood I had once sanded by myself. The lake was calm, with ripples stretching toward the horizon like quiet affirmations. For the first time in years, I wasn't replaying a scene. I was living one. Inside, the walls were warm clay, sunlight filtered through cotton curtains. There were no framed apologies, no curated narratives, just breath and space and time. 3 weeks had passed since the letter. Walter hadn't called. Clarice hadn't replied. Harper had sent one message, 2 lines long. I didn't know. I'm sorry if it hurt. I hadn't answered. Not because I was angry, because I was done curating grace for people who never asked how much it cost me. That afternoon, I unpacked the last box from storage. Old journals, faded sketchbooks, and one envelope with a sticky note from Dean Moore. If you ever decide to build, not just fix, call me. I smiled. That evening, I sat on the cabin steps with Jasmine on speakerphone. She didn't say hello, just asked, "So how does peace feel?" "Quiet," I said, "but not empty." She exhaled. "I can live with that." The next day, I stood in front of a semicircle of teenagers at the local community center, a classroom that smelled like dry erase markers and possibility. My first creative writing class. The room was awkward and honest in the way only first classes can be. A girl named Mia raised her hand slowly. "Does it ever stop hurting?" she asked. I paused. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I finally did. "Not always," I said. "But it stops defining you." Her shoulders dropped. She nodded. After class, she lingered behind and handed me a folded note. I read it that night, sitting by the fire. I used to think I was just quiet, but now I think I'm brave. It hit harder than I expected. Not because she wrote it, but because I believed her. And maybe, for the first time, I believed that about myself too. That night, I took out a new journal. Blank pages, a clean slate. I wrapped the red ribbon around it. The same ribbon I'd once found under a loose porch plank. The same one from my hair when I was 8, holding a red notebook and waiting for someone to notice. I didn't label it restart, I labeled it forward. Later that week, I lit a fire in the backyard pit. The night air was brisk but kind. I pulled out the last page from my old diary, the one that read, "I just wanted to be enough." I didn't cry. I didn't hold it back. I just whispered, "You always were." Then I let the flame take it. Ash lifted like memory, quiet and complete. The next morning, I walked to the edge of the dock. The boards creaked under my feet, but they creaked for me now. I sat and looked out at the water and whispered, "They broke me." Then I breathed. But I rebuilt. Not to prove them wrong. To remember I was right. Today I live in a cabin by a lake, with warm-colored walls and the photo of a girl who learned how to carry silence without being buried in it. I no longer wait for recognition. I live like I already have it. And when people ask how I found peace, I tell them, "You don't find peace. You build it. And this time, you build it for you." I live in peace now, Not because the world handed it to me, but because I stopped asking for permission to keep it. The silence that once haunted me has become my sanctuary, and the girl I used to be finally has a home she can belong to. What I've learned is this: when you reclaim your dignity, no one, not even your own family, can erase you again. Standing up for yourself isn't about revenge. It's about remembering that you were never the problem. If you've ever been overlooked, rewritten, or made to shrink so others could shine, tell me your story in the comments. What did it take for you to reclaim your voice? And if you're still on that journey, stay close. The next video is for every woman who chose to rise instead of stay quiet.